Have you ever wondered why after a forest fire, there's not only tons of growth, but the growth that is there is super healthy? Let's talk about that. What is going on, everyone? Welcome to another very exciting episode right here on the MIgardener channel. Like I said, in today's episode, we're going to talk about why ash is such an important component to helping aid plant growth, but we're also going to talk about how it can help your garden and some easy ways to apply it. So with that being said, let's go. So wood ash is something that a lot of people have access to. Now, if you're living in the inner city, ash is not something that you may come across as often. However, it is still something that you can make or produce or even purchase because it is so accessible. So don't let this, don't let your geographical location prevent you from knowing about the benefits of wood ash. Now, also, not all ash has to be from wood. There are lots of companies that produce ash from things like sunflower hulls. Literally, the sunflower industry is so large that they take the hulls, the outer coating of the seed, and they actually will burn that to generate sunflower hull ash. It sounds crazy, but farmers will purchase that, and sunflower companies will sell it as a byproduct because it's such a beneficial resource to use to amend their soil. So it's crazy how many different forms of ash there are. You can have paper ash, you can have wood ash, you can have leaf ash, you can have sunflower hull ash, you can even have rice hull ash, believe it or not. The rice industry is so large that they take the tiny little husk, that little hull, and they will burn that. The corn industry, again, another large industry, will actually burn the cobs. Once they shuck the corn, they will actually burn the cobs to create corn cob ash. So there are so many different forms of ash out there. And so it's definitely accessible. If you need to buy some online, you can definitely find some. But as a home gardener, you can also produce some as long as you can have a fire. And so whether you heat your home, or whether you have bonfires or burn leaves, you can generate some ash. And ash is so good. But why is it so good? Well, ash is rich in a few things. The first thing that it's rich in is potassium. Potassium is a mineral that plants use to actually regulate their fruiting, overall plant health, and vigor. Potassium is the third number on a fertilizer label. You have nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. So if it's like a 1-1-5, that 5 would be the percentage by weight of how much potassium is available. Now, potassium is K. A lot of people wonder, what does the K have to do with potassium? Well, K actually derives from kali, which is the Arabic word for alkali. And alkali comes from wood ash. So wood ash has long had a history with a connection with potassium, and that's why it's such an integral part to farms all around the world and has been for millennia. People realized that they could actually harness the power of wood ash to apply to their gardens and their farms to actually amend their crops. Potassium, as I said, is an integral part to fruit yields, plant vigor, and overall plant health. And so by adding wood ash, you're going to be adding an abundance of potassium. So wood ash has obviously played a very important role in agriculture for thousands of years, but not just because of the potassium, but also because of another mineral, a lesser known mineral called calcium. Now, we've all heard of calcium for strong bones and things like that. Drink your milk, you gotta have your calcium. But plants also need calcium. Calcium is responsible for creating cell walls and structure. It's actually what gives plants its rigidity. You see, we have bones, and our bones are made of calcium, but the plants do not have bones. They have cell walls, and cell walls are made up of calcium. That's why plants don't just stay floppy and grow along the ground and all limp. That's how they can actually grow straight and tall and actually unfold so they can generate energy through photosynthesis. The leaves have to stay straight. But if you don't have enough calcium, that's where you start to see plants that actually start to droop. And also, if you have tomatoes will start to rot on the bottom. The bottom rot is also known as blossom end rot. Things like squash, peppers, melons, tomatoes can all have blossom end rot, and that occurs from a lack of calcium. Now, there can be a lack of calcium or inconsistent watering. Inconsistent watering is also a common cause for blossom end rot. I just thought I'd throw that in there because oftentimes we have enough calcium, but because of our inconsistent watering, water is actually the catalyst that helps uptake the calcium into the plant. So if you forget to water and the plant goes really dry, they can suffer from some blossom end rot that way. But if you're watering on a consistent schedule and you're still noticing blossom end rot, try adding some calcium. So why is there so much calcium in wood ash, and how does it have any connection with potassium? Well, I'll tell you. So calcium, the reason why there's so much in wood ash is the same reason why there's so much potassium in wood ash. That's because when you actually burn something down, you're concentrating its minerals, because matter can be neither created nor destroyed. It's either evaporated or it's condensed down. And so when you're burning like a big log, you're taking everything that log was made of and condensing it down, which is great because it allows you to take that huge log and turn it into a small little handful of wood ash, which allows you to spread that concentrated minerals all over the garden. But that still doesn't answer the question of how potassium and calcium are correlated. And this is where it gets really cool. So calcium, if you've ever had an antacid like Tums, an antacid is an antacid. And in order to be an antacid, it has to be alkaline. If you have a pH scale, 7 being neutral, anything lower than 7 is acidic, anything higher than 7 is alkaline. And so in order to balance, in order to create an equilibrium, you have to take an alkaline substance in order to balance an acidic substance. And what's amazing is the fact that if you look at the root word of potassium, which was the letter K, remember, K stood for kali, which is actually Arabic for alkali. And alkali is Arabic for wood ash. And so when you have an alkaline substance, you essentially all take it back full circle to wood ash. That's pretty awesome. All right, now that you all had your chemistry lesson and your little geek out session with me about the history of wood ash, I want to talk about how to add this to your garden, because I think that's why you're all here in the end, is to learn how to use it in your garden to help you grow big or go home. So what I've done here is I've taken wood ash and I've actually mixed it with wet sand. The reason why is because wood ash is very light. And because it's very light, it can blow around and it's not good to breathe. Also, when you're applying it, it makes application really difficult. So what I like to do is I like to take my wood ash and simply do a 1-to-1 ratio of wet sand to my wood ash. And that way, it actually helps to kind of bind the wood ash so that it's not going to blow around, but you're also not going to end up with a sludgy mess. Because if you take water and add it to wood ash, you've literally just made a sludgy, nasty mess, and that becomes nearly impossible to apply. So this is an old farmer's trick of just using some sand, a little bit of damp sand or wet sand to actually bind up the wood ash. And that's what we're going to use to apply the wood ash to our soil. Now, the first thing that I want you to do is to do a pH test. Going back to our geek out session, the alkalinity of this can really affect your soil negatively if you add too much. And so you want to do a pH test first. I go to my local pool supply store just down the road and I get some pH test strips. I'll post a link in the description box below to where you can get yours as well. And you can actually pick them up for relatively cheap. But you want to take some soil from your garden, mix it in with equal parts water, so a 1-to-1 ratio of soil to water, and then dip your pH test strip in that water so that you can see what the pH of your soil is. If your soil is already alkaline, you don't want to add any wood ash to your soil. So again, remember, alkaline is anything higher than 7. If it's like a 7.5 or an 8, that is alkaline. And your garden generally wants to be slightly acidic. Most plants in the garden prefer a slightly acidic soil, with the exception of brassicas. Brassicas being things like broccoli, cauliflower, kale, and whatnot. So those plants can tolerate slightly alkaline soil, but if it's already alkaline to begin with, I wouldn't increase it anymore because wood ash is very alkaline. If your soil is acidic, if it's like 5 or 5.5, you can get by with using some wood ash, and how much to add is going to be based on the plants that you're planning on growing. So in this bed here, I have my garlic. Now, I've already planted my garlic, so I'm not going to amend this bed with any wood ash this year, but once I harvest, I will amend in the spring. So once I harvest this, that's when I'm going to amend this. But this bed right here, this bed is actually going to have my tomatoes in it next year. Tomatoes prefer slightly acidic soil, and so because I don't want to make it too alkaline, I'm only going to add about 1 cup per 10 square feet. So I'm simply going to take my scoop, and I'm simply going to just shake it over the top of the soil. That was about a 1/2 cup. And that was about 1 cup. It's that simple. 1 cup per 10 square feet for things like tomatoes, peppers, the plants that like acidic soil. Now, if you're growing things like brassicas, broccoli, cabbage, kale, kohlrabi, lots of those brassicas, those can tolerate slightly alkaline soil. And so they're going to do better if you give them something like 1.5 to 2 cups per 10 square feet. So again, just knowing what you're going to plant where can help. Now, if you don't know what you're going to plant and where, a simple broad application of just 1 cup per 10 square feet, that's going to be fine, and that's definitely going to get you by. But a little bit goes a very long way. Just remember that. So with that being said, again, I just want to go over the fact I used damp sand to mix in with the wood ash. You want to make sure that the wood ash, I didn't mention this, but you do want to make sure that the wood ash is from chemical-free sources. So if you've burnt things like OSB or like things that have glues or paints or things like that, it's best not to apply those to your garden. Only pure sources. So pure paper, pure plant products, pure leaves, pure wood, and things like that. Those are the things that I'd recommend adding the ash to your garden for. So that's another thing as well. Just make sure that the source is pure. And also make sure that you do a pH test first to make sure that your soil is not already alkaline in nature. And with that being said, I hope you guys enjoyed. I hope you learned something new. If you did, make sure to throw a like up there. Subscribe if you're not yet already. And and one last thing is that I know you're going to ask this, can I do this right now? Absolutely. You can do this right now. You can do this just before you plant. There's really no problem with doing it right now or just before you plant. You can do it any time, because at the end of the day, what you're doing is you're amending your soil. And soil amending can take place any time in your garden's life. So you can do this, just after you pull out your plants to prepare for the next year. You can do it halfway through the winter. You can do it in the middle of winter or the beginning of spring. It doesn't matter. So I hope you guys enjoyed. I hope you learned something new. As always, this is Luke from the MIgardener channel reminding you to grow big or go home. And we'll catch you all later. See ya. Bye.